We'll revise what we did in session 2 and looking at tone, but this time using coloured pencil. So again, get your pupils to experiment using crosshatch and stipple, and blended tone using the side of the pencil. And interestingly, we've introduced directional line that goes with the contours of the shape of the object. So because we're looking at different colours, I've introduced red, but these are the colours of the composition that we're looking at today. We've looked at orange and yellow and red and green, but you can begin to see how you can go from dark to light, just as we did in the earlier sessions, using the same techniques, but this time with the coloured pencils. And I would get your pupils or students to use coloured pencils to draw with, and disregard the 2B pencil at this stage. So using your pencils, the idea here is to allow the pupils to consider the pressure and how to get the pigment as dark as it can be, and then lightly shading to almost just letting the white of the paper be the highlight of the colour. So this is important, that the pressure of the side of the pencil is used. Get your pupils to have a go at doing that using the coloured pencils, and that gives them a really good way of interpreting the still life in front of them, particularly light and shade. Just as an interlude, you may not have done this already, but it's always useful to introduce your pupils to the colour wheel. I'm assuming that you've got this pinned onto the art room wall somewhere, but it's a good start, and we will come back to the colour wheel looking at the primary colours and the secondary colours. But as an activity, it won't do any harm for your pupils to copy these into the template with their pencil crayons. And in future videos, we'll use watercolour as well, and I'll explain that in much more detail. But a good skill to introduce your pupils to colour, but we'll come back to that later on. So here we have the composition, and I've used the green pencil and the yellow pencil. I've not used a 2B pencil at all, but if you can see that the compositions help with the grid, and already I'm beginning to define the pressure of the base of each of the objects with a line that is much thicker, just like we did in session 1. So holding the pencil firmly and at the tip to increase the pressure of the lines. So that creates a line drawing. We take the grid away, you can just rub that out. And there we have some of the texture being introduced. So using the side of the pencil, we can introduce tone. But the idea is to stop pupils thinking, okay, it's a yellow banana, and what I've seen happen is they just fill the entire shape with the colour that's on the pencil crayon. And we need to think about adding layer upon layer, gently. You can certainly cover over, but just very gently. If you demonstrate this to them or show this film to fill it in, and then we can start adding the contour lines. So we can, the cross-hatching technique that we used earlier, and again much more pressure here. So we're beginning to develop how to express and explain what it is that they're drawing using all of these techniques. So with the orange, we use the stipple, but I find that if you use first of all the blended tone across, and see where my faint lines are, that's the top, imagining that the light is coming from the top right this way, which is always going to be the way with these demonstrations and a lot of other demonstrations you can find on YouTube. And then use the side of the pencil here to add the texture and the stipple effect to get that wonderful feel of the orange skin. And then here, use the side of the pencil again just to gently blend. What we don't want is great big areas of solid colour. That's the last thing that we want. And then you can start to add contour lines again, and this way, to describe the spherical shape of the apple. So there's many ways of colouring this in without just thinking of solid blocks of colour, because we're introducing tone and light and shade, and it's really a good way of using the pencil. So we want to avoid a lot of this, using the heavy pressure at the base of each object. That's my thing anyway, but that's how we get started with the composition. If you're lucky and you've got a full range of colours in your art cupboard, the next thing to do is to introduce darker shades of yellow, which is usually yellow ochre, and darker and deeper shades of orange, which will go towards cadmium red, and deeper and darker shades of green, edging towards the greeny blue. And with this, you can repeat the process again, but building up by adding more contour lines. Oh, made a mistake. So that's actually quite an interesting, happy mistake, because I find that turning the page helps the lines. So allow your pupils to move. If this is all stuck onto a massive big drawing board, they're going to find it quite difficult. But using the lines to create the spherical shapes and adding more depth. And the same with the orange. The deeper colour now we're going to apply to accentuate the three-dimensional aspect of the shape. I'm not going to use contour lines on here because we got stippled, but I am going to use the side of the pencil to give it more depth, and then even more stippling going on. Now this is time consuming, but most good pieces of drawing are time consuming. But what's happening, I know it's a very simple composition, is that your pupils are utilising a good range of skills which will put them in good stead for all their future drawing, and they won't feel like they're failing when they can start to build on the skill sets that we are showing them through these videos. So at this stage, once we've got the light and tone, I'm always tempted to pick up a 2B pencil and start to add and render the darkest lines, but not all around the outline, because that's what we're trying to avoid, is to show the highlights and the depth, and to include just wherever you think you can get your pupils to look at which is the darkest part of the composition and add the lines. And it just gives a little bit of an aspect that there is a weight to the objects that you're drawing, and you can add detail. And the best bit is, never get them to use rubbers if you can. That's difficult, I know, but this is a great way to use an eraser, and that is to add the highlights by removing quite a substantial amount of the pigment of the crayon to suggest that there is a sheen and a shine to the object. And this is really satisfying at the end of the drawing. Why are you rubbing it out? We're not rubbing it out. We're letting the white of the paper add the highlights. You can also use the side of the pencil, the 2B pencil, to introduce tone for the shadows as well. So now they're beginning to look like they're sitting on the table. But these are all the fine details that make the composition pull together. But don't overuse the pencil, because we're not doing a graphite drawing, we're working with colour. But that's the end product. For the next video, I'm going to introduce more items into the still life, and we're going to look at secondary colours and tertiary colours and investigate how these can be used to create depth of shadow and tone.